such as the ones from Peru, Brazil, Mexico, Inter-American Defense for the Drug Abuse Commission, Colombia, United States, Canada. For inscriptions, enrollment, and more information, you can visit www.myth.org. Preserve the environment is essential, and we need to do it. General Jorge Luis Chávez Cresta, Ministry of Defense of Peru. Gustavo Lino Olaya, Permanent Representative of Peru in OAS. General Brigadier from the Army of Mexico, Marco Antonio Rios, President of the Delegative Council of the Inter-American Defense Board. Mayor Doar from the Air Force Brazil, Mayor de Oliveira Pinto, General Director of the Secretariat of the Inter-American Defense Board. Brigadier of the Air Force, Nestor Salazar Echauri, Vice President of the Council of Delegates. General of Group, Abel Martinez Garcia, Chief of Studies of the Inter-American Defense College. Ladies and gentlemen, observers of the Inter-American Defense Board, audience in general, joining through the Zoom platform and presentially in our YouTube channel. Good morning, everyone. I am Luis Alberto Ayasque Rayaneda, representative of the Natural Disasters Prevention and Environment, and from the House of Soldier. This is the time when I will provide some administrative information. I will inform you about the security. In case there is an emergency, we are on the second floor on 214 room of the House of Soldier. We have 3 exits of emergency. If you can communicate, if you're not feeling okay, we can provide you the aid immediately. We will have from the Army of Peru, Fenit Comaz Bartolo, Chief of the Cooperation of Disasters of the Inter-American Defense Secretariat, who will be moderating the conference. The floor is yours, Colonel. Thank you for the presentation. Luis Arrasto, General Coordinator of the conference. Now, I am very pleased to introduce Mayor Doar of the Air Force of Brazil, Flavio Luis de Oliveira Pinto, General Director of the Secretariat of the Inter-American Defense Board, who will give the opening remarks. General Jorge Luis Chávez Cresta, Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Peru, Ambassador Gustavo Lino Olaya, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Peru in OAS, and from the Hemispheric Commission of OAS. On behalf of them, I salute you. Salute all the authorities that have been already mentioned. At the same time, ladies, gentlemen, participants that are with us virtually, presentially, good morning, everyone. We are very excited to be with you this morning for the first conference on protection of the environment organized by IADB along with the Ministry of the Defense of Peru. This event, ladies and gentlemen, is key to joint efforts with the protection of the environment throughout the hemisphere. The objective of the conference is fundamental: What I mean by this is that we need to provide valuable information, updated information from different perspectives about the lessons that we learned, the good practices of the armed forces, and everything that has to do with security and environment. When we apply these practices, they can contribute significantly to the success of this important topic. Therefore, today we are gathered here to share the knowledge, to share ideas, experiences on how we can develop an effective role, acknowledging that the challenges that we faced does not have borders and that our task is to collaborate to look for solutions together. The mission is for each of the participants of the conference so they can play a fundamental role also on looking for a more sustainable future for all of us. So right now I will talk directly to the ones that are on our Zoom platform. This is when close to 6,000 participants that are with us and some other people on a YouTube channel joining the conference. We should underscore that the environmental protection is not only our responsibility, it's the responsibility of all the society, all of the participants to show the commitment towards the protection with the environment with a broader vision. The participants, the ones that are joining, show the commitment, prove the commitment of the social well-being of our people. The environmental protection is not only an easy responsibility, obligation that we share towards our planet. This conference, therefore, it's gonna be a group of ideas to collaborate in concrete actions. Welcome, everyone. The first conference on protection of the environment of the Inter-American Defense Board. Together, we will face the challenges and we will build a better future. Finally, I have the pleasure to introduce General Jorge Luis Chavez Cresta, Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Peru, for the opening remarks of the conference. Thank you so much.
Celebrating its 80th anniversary this year, the
Celebrando
American Defense Board predates almost every existing international organization on this planet. Established in 1942, the IADB is older than the United Nations, which was formed in 1945. It is older than the Organization of American States, created in 1948, and it is older than NATO, formed the following year in 1949. The IADB predates them all. It was first of its kind, and that is a mighty foundation and a source of pride for our hemisphere and all trusted partners. And as partners, we are all working together, whether we're working to educate the future leaders of our hemisphere, or achieving greater collaboration and information sharing in cyberspace, or addressing illegal fishing in our oceans and the transnational organized crime that plagues our people, or seeking to integrate women into our defense and security forces, or collaborating on humanitarian assistance operations, disaster relief, and search and rescue, or whether we're innovating through the development and exercise of a mechanism of cooperation in disasters, MECODE. It is joint, interagency, and multinational collaboration that makes this all possible. In that last major undertaking, the IADB incorporated 110 members from 16 countries to exercise the MECODE. For the exercise, IADB used a pioneering simulation operation between the Inter-American Defense College and the University of Maryland. This is the type of innovation needed to address multi-domain and multidimensional transnational threats to the countries of our hemisphere, because solving today's complex transnational multidimensional threats requires interagency collaboration, whether within states or externally through multilateralism. Without this collaboration, these threats will surely persist. For 80 years, the Inter-American Defense Board has played a leading role in developing these solutions. May the next 80 years bring enduring collaboration and peace so that our nations may thrive and our citizens prosper.
Buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone. Quoting Mr. Antonio Gutierrez, General Secretariat of the United Nations, who in 2020 stated, "We are all part of the global crisis at an environmental level, so we all need to make environment more sustainable. This is essential. We need to work together faster so our legacy for the current generations can be a planet that we can live in." Through the development of the conference, you can send questions through the messages that we have on our Zoom platform on our YouTube channel. They will be answered by the speakers after each of the presentations. After the first 3 presentations of 10 minutes, so it's an honor to introduce our first presenter, Mayor of the Armed Forces of Peru, Marco Francisco Roble Bocanegra, who currently is the Director of Telematics on the Air Force of Peru. He will be talking about the capacities on the airspace that can contribute to the protection of the environment. Good morning, General Robles.
Mi general, entonces le escucha.
Volumen. Asimismo, traigo el saludo para todos ustedes de nuestro comandante
Good
general.
morning, everyone. I salute you on behalf of General of Air Alfonso Arcadi Saletti. And in this opportunity, I am with Colonel Fab Wilfredo Guzmán Quevedo, Commander of the Surveillance Center of the Republic of Peru, and Javier Cardosa Chira, Director of Meteorology of the Armed Forces of Peru.
Siguiente, por favor.
Next slide.
La siguiente.
Next slide, please.
El presente sumario, que es el inicio de mi exposición.
So this is how we summarize the topics, going from the general to the specific. Point number 1 being, in this global context and national context, I'm going to talk about the national perspective regarding the caring of the environment challenges and the protection of the environment. How are we organized is number 2. Number 3, the main threats towards our biodiversity and natural resources. Number 4, finally, is the purpose of this presentation, to talk about the main capacities that we have in air to protect the environment. I say contribute because, as we will see in just a minute, the solution is integrating the multisectoral capacities of different institutions, national, but also international. In the global context, what is the information that we have on the World Economic Forum on natural disasters risk? On the first 10, as we can see, 6 are regarding climate change. The climate change, it's something that requires the need to be prepared to face the natural disasters. We also know how this is interrelated environment not taken care of, climate change can affect directly or the geopolitical, social, economical situations. The Strategic Planning National Center, that is an organization that is under the Ministry of Council of Peru, and it's a body of the strategic planning of Peru, mandates that the high probability has to be with loss of biodiversity, natural disasters, climate change, extreme climate success, and they are qualified with the greater probability of happening and greater impact to the country. So this requires more competitivity for the future to achieve sustainable development. Peru is highly vulnerable to climate change, to natural disasters. What we see here is a summary, the last 30 years of environmental phenomena that had affected directly. We have El Niño, Amazonia, that I'm gonna talk in just a minute, Coastal Niño, natural disasters that we have last year because of a fuel leak. So what are how is it organized, Peru? This is number 2, to comply with the international and national commitments regarding climate change and protection of the environment. We start with the political constitution, saying that we promote in the country through organizations and national agreements for development of our country. Policy 19 is about sustainable development and public policies for the protection of the environment. We have the National Policy of Environment, and we just passed the National Strategy on Climate Change. Special organizations such as Civil Defense, Natural Disasters Center, Attorney's Office that are specialized on environment, on the public management. And we have made operational all of this organization with the armed forces that are always preparing and training to face any risk, any event, any catastrophe. So what are the main threats that we have in Peru? I will start with this video. This is something that can show us some of the main threats that we face in the Amazonia, basically. And how is this affecting deforestation, illegal mining, contamination of rivers, human trafficking, asset laundering, corruption. This is a whole system that definitely should be called a system. Depredation, contamination of rivers, illegal mining, murdering of environmental protectors. We have a very diverse country. These are the levels that are not accepted by the standards on mercury, for instance, in our rivers. These are some of the efforts that we're carrying out to protect the Amazonia. But we need a lot of help. The Amazonia, Peru, with 77,000 square kilometers of biodiversity, is fundamental for the planet. It's a scenario of many threats. They are destroying it. We have deforestation, drug trafficking, terrorism, organized crime, contamination of the rivers, as I said, illegal mining, informal mining, trafficking in person, children exploitation, money laundering, asset laundering, terrorism. Only in 2020, due to the pandemic, the state prioritized the security forces. We lost more than 200,000 acres. This is the greater number of acres that we have lost, according to the Ministry of Environment, during the last 20 years. The EA, on the reports and the studies, on the research, we have cultivation and crops plantation, and we are number 2 along with Colombia on the production of cocaine. You can see the map. This is the mining map, the one that we have on the screen right now. Unfortunately, illegal mining is currently producing more money than drug trafficking, actually. And we have deforestation. We have a comparison. This is November 2020, November 2022, and we can see depredation due to mining, illegal mining, I must underscore. Another problem that we have is illegal trafficking of drugs through the borders of Peru, Brazil, Bolivia. And the map that we have on the right, that is the route. The problem with the route is that creates organized crime, corruption at different levels, corruption in the states, to reach Europe by Africa, and having to pay to the organized crime and even terrorist organizations. This is why the problem is so severe. This is the Andes. During the last 30 years, 50 years, have lost 50% of its biodiversity due to climate change. Forestal fires. This is also a problem that we face. Destruction of deforestation, life on the land, damage of the air, damage of the water, all the bodies of water. In January last year, we had a leak of fuel in front of the coast of Lima, contaminating a good amount of the area. We're talking about acres of contamination due to fuel. I don't know if you remember the problem. The problem of this catastrophe is that it will take many years. It's estimated that near to 20 years we will take to recover and to have our clean shores again, and all of the ecosystems that were destroyed, of course, because of this spill of last year in front of the coast of our city capital, Lima. Now we can go directly to the purpose of our exposition. The main capacities that we have on defense on Peru, contributing to the protection of climate change. We start with the satellite, LUSA. This is a terrestrial observation, 70 centimeters of resolution. It's low orbit. It's orbiting 700 kilometers, more or less. It rounds 14 times daily on a speed of 27,000 kilometers per hour. Regarding the environment, the satellite has the mission of observing for defense, security, development, but also to monitor different problems such as illegal mining, drug trafficking, deforestation, volcano activity, climate change situations, creating lagoons, bodies of water, floods, landslides affecting the communities and people that are living on these areas, and also locating spills and all the other natural disasters. It's important to mention that thanks to the satellite, we benefit all of the public institutions of Peru, because this is something that you can access for free. The development, the use is for free. So our space agency has a convention with some other countries such as South Korea, Argentina, satellites of the European Union, Kazakhstan, that is in Asia, Central Asia. We have this constellation of satellites so we can visit our territory and we can take images, metrics, but also radar images. You can see a photograph with different resolutions, and the resolution of our metric has a great difference, as we can see. Only on the region, the submetric satellite has a resolution such as the one that we have in Peru. Chile, I know that has this same resolution. Canada also has the same satellite with the same resolution. These are some of the products. Identification of flocks. This is one of the results. This is the picture. This is before and after El Niño phenomenon. Based on satellite work, we can work on plans, I think, on prevention plans, on construction plans to identify the main areas that have been affected for prevention measurements as well. Also, this can contribute to identify the deforestation of forests. This complement with some other drones and some other images that we have because we also have that capacity. With the satellite image, we also identify forestal fires, many of them because of humans, of course, for stays on the agriculture, expansion on crops, on agrochemical intentions. And this is the mission of the Air Force that has been always related to security and national protection. This is our main process. But the new roles, the new threats, the new agreements that we have in the Constitution on the defense of the civil population and the foreign policies. This is the shield on the different units that also have the capacity of environmental protection, such as the Amazonic Center. This is very important information that we have on the Amazonia, direction of meteorology. This is because of El Niño phenomena as well. And we can fight forestal fires, humanitarian aids, civil defense, and the direction of surveillance and sensors, electronic sensors of the drones can also provide images of all these threats in air.
Madre de Dios, ¿no? Siempre estos trabajos se hacen en forma conjunta con la Fiscalía.
This is something that we do jointly with the Attorney General's office.
Necesita tener evidencia para
Evidence is needed to be able to have the proof and to be able to act. So thanks to our satellite, we have around N80.
La deforestación, la minería ilegal, ¿no?
Illegal mining, deforestation.
Espacios naturales de nuestro territorio, cómo se están perdiendo nuestros glaciares, y si hubiera algo
and if there's something abnormal on our territory, this is something that we can also access, type of information that we can access. To see if the authorizations are being accepted.
Hay diferentes organismos que tienen medio ambiente, el Ministerio de Agricultura, gobiernos regionales, gobiernos locales.
Ministry of Agriculture, Flora, Fauna Services.
Que necesitan de esta información para sus planes de desarrollo y diferentes proyectos institucionales propios de
that
cada
are also supporting some of the other projects.
El Centro de Vigilancia Amazónico Nacional tiene un módulo de vigilancia del espacio aéreo. Estamos monitoreando cómo se mueve el tráfico.
We also monitor the drug trafficking.
Con mapas de calor, cómo es que se mueve el efecto globo. Es importante también para las decisiones. Asimismo, estamos monitoreando tormentas eléctricas, sistemas convectivos y monitoreo de las condiciones atmosféricas a través de
and atmospheric conditions through our Directorate of Aeronautical Meteorology and the stations, the automatic meteorological stations and the conventional ones as well. And we also have a meteorological station and a point of observation in the Antarctic that allows us to make all the different changes of temperature in that area, which affect directly the temperature in front of our coasts. We have open information and a network through the 24/7 that allows us to have the meteorological reports every day. And this creates a database that is worked and published in our webpage. And in the Geo Sudan, that is a portal that we have through agreements with other institutions, and you can see our work there. At the same time, we're monitoring the El Niño through the Air Force of Peru so that we can have the real-time meteorological monitoring and alerts and variable, when there is a variable atmospheric and when there are floods as well. So this is number 8, the group number 8 from our Guardian system. We have some prepared staff, and they have the capacity of carrying 6 tons of water each one to put out fires. So this is a joint work with the civil defense and the land forces as well, where we organize and plan for these forest fires. So this is the Helibalde system with helicopters and buckets. And we started with this system in 2019 to fight fires and contribute to these national emergencies. We also have international assistance with Ecuador. We have an operation in Santa Cruz de la Sierra in Bolivia with 74 hours of flight and the transportation of 244 passengers and 6 tons of water. And we charge it by means of the natural water sources. And with that, we put out the fires, the forest fires. We take the water to the borders of the fires in order to avoid it from expanding and helping the firefighters so that they can put out the fire. So this is a complementary type of work. And before I finish, I would like to talk about this project, the SIPAN, that is the system of protection of the, it's an integral, a technological, an institutional system for the collection, analysis, and development of information in real time for decision making. And it gives us the opportunity to do reconnaissance and to make better decisions. And it is organized in 4 modules: territorial, airspace surveillance, meteorological surveillance, and also the surveillance against organized crime. And this is all collected and systematized and analyzed with added value to give it to the SIPAN, that is the national intelligence group with comprised of the national government and local governments that analyze it. And with all this, we can identify the exact localization of any type of problem. It's a satellite and air and land facilitating the state to work against any illegal problem and protecting the environment at the same time. With this satellite and air monitoring, we can localize exactly where the problem is. And finally, I'm closing my presentation with this message that never before have we needed a correlation effort as big as this to protect the environment. This is an image of everything that we think we need to articulate all the public entities that have to do with the environment through the public policies and some other binding regulations so that everybody can put their capacities to work and become more efficient and in the care of our planet and our territory.
Listo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. With this, I have finished my presentation. Major General Air Force of Peru, Marcos Francisco Robles Bocanegra, Director of Telematics of the Air Force of Peru. On behalf of the Inter-American Defense Board, we would like to thank you for the time that you have provided us to share your knowledge, stressing on the need of looking for the synergy of the capacities of everybody that works in the environment, and take advantage from this place to thank Colonel Mitchell Inkelson, Secretary General of the System of Cooperation of the Air Forces of the Americas, that accompanies us from the South Platform. Today, it is a pleasure for me to introduce General Jorge Luis Chavez Cresta, Minister of Defense of the Republic of Peru. Thank you very much, Colonel. And allow me, before giving my presentation, to give my best congratulations to the board that is comprised of our Chancery and the representatives and officials of diplomatic officials and ladies and gentlemen that work there from the armies of the Americas. Ambassador Gustavo Lino Ancejolaya, permanent representative of Peru to the OAS and president of the Commission of Hemispheric Security of the OAS. Brigadier General of the Mexican Army, Marco Antonio Albanez Reyes, president of the Council of Delegates of the Inter-American Defense Board. Major Brigadier Air Force of Brazil, Flavio Luz de Oliveira Pinto, General Director of the Secretary of the Inter-American Defense Board. Major General of the United States, Richard Headcom, Director of the Inter-American Defense College. Ladies and gentlemen, delegates of the member countries and observers of the Inter-American Defense Board. Speakers of the first conference on the protection of the environment. A dear audience that accompanies us, both face-to-face and in line in a conference to train and inform. That is so important to guarantee the ecosystem and the environment of all the territory of the Americas. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all. It is for me a great privilege to speak to you in this first conference on the protection of the environment in close coordination with the Inter-American Defense Board, the Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Peru, and that was organized to let you have as participants more than a knowledge, but a moment of reflection and identification due to the severe damages that the environment is suffering today, and that many of our countries are going through, and that many countries are decided to protect it and preserve it with the responsibility to guarantee the future of our next generations. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last 30 years, the protection of the environment has become a vitally important issue in the search of trying to find the equilibrium of producing industrially without affecting the habitat of our humanity and of all living creatures in the planet. More than 2 million deaths a year are produced in the world caused by contamination, pollution, and also the human action. That is through the cutting of trees and the presence of a factor that has harmed our planet, which is illegal mining that has affected our ecosystem. I am a witness as Vice Minister of Mines and President of the multisectorial institution against illegal mining. This is why I ask each one of the citizens, men and women, to guarantee the protection of the ecosystem and the environment. We are also witnesses that in few years our planet has changed. It has changed as a consequence of our customs, our negligence, our neglect, and above all, of our bad decisions. Our Amazons in the Americas is considered one of the lungs of our planet. In our country, Peru, in the departments of Loreto and Ucayali, that are the main part of the Amazon, and the deforestation has intensified in the last years. The illegal cutting of trees increased in 17% in Loreto and in 23% in other places that are contributing to the loss of our trees in our forests at great scale. And if we don't take the corresponding actions, we will have a local impact that is going to be very damaging. And this will affect the food security of the people that depend directly of the biodiversity, and also a global impact, because we have lost the great capacity of our Amazon forest to stop carbon emissions. Illegal mining is the most destructive because it not only causes deforestation, but also the total destruction of the ecosystems. Right now, we have detected that in the area of the Department of Loreto, at the river Amazonas and Putumayo and Madre de Dios, and part 1, where we have to guarantee those ecosystems, it is very concerning to see the mutation and the presence of illegal mining, and that are damaging our institutions and are causing the increase of drug trafficking, the illegal cutting of trees, and the inappropriate occupation of lands. This is why, as the defenders of the environment, we have the responsibility to regulate and raise awareness among the citizens, men and women, about these illegal activities that not only contaminate our environment, but also cause irreparable damages in our societies, in which each one of us have the right to live with security and tranquility and health. And I want to also congratulate the organizers of this conference and the Inter-American Defense Board, our Chancery, and the representatives of each one of these actions, and all the officials that have intervened in this conference, and to wish you the best of success. to each one of the participants that with their information are going to enrich the decision-making to be able to carry out the effective participation of our armed forces in the Americas to contribute for this action that we might take as a consequence of these conferences and seminars. We can reach effective solutions and results. I think that we all know what is happening. We have seen the studies. Now we have to do something more aggressive. We have to operate in the sense of guaranteeing with training and actions the protection of our ecosystem. I reiterate my congratulations for the very successful conference of each one of you and the success of the participants that will contribute to become a multiplying entity so that many more people like you become aware of this great task that we have in front of us to protect the environment. Ladies and gentlemen and participants, and each one of you, I want to reiterate my best willingness to contribute to continue with this process in a successful way. For this event and for making us see the needs and the responsibility of assuming the challenges to protect our planet and to ensure the environment for our future generations. Thank you all. Good morning. General Jorge Luis Chavez Cresta, Minister of Defense of the Republic of Peru. On behalf of the Inter-American Defense Board and the audience that accompanies us, we would like to thank you for your remarks in this very important event that makes us reflect about the actions that have to be carried out by the armed forces of our hemisphere that contribute to the protection of the environment. Next, I am pleased to introduce our second panel member, Captain of War and Sea of the Marine of Brazil, Alvaristo Nakim Jair Jr., who is right now the head of the Department of the Environment for military organizations of the Navy of Brazil, and who will talk about environmental management and actions for the protection of the environment applied in the Navy of Brazil. Captain Jair, good morning. You have the floor. Good morning to all of you. I'm going to share my presentation. Good morning. I'm Captain Jair from the Directorate of the Sea and Ports of Brazil. I would like to first start by congratulating the authorities and also to all the public in general that is participating in this very important conference on the protection of the environment. It is with great satisfaction that I have the opportunity of sharing with you some of the experiences of good practices in the area of environmental protection that the Navy of Brazil has been applying in the military administrations. My presentation is going to be divided into 4 areas. First, introduction. Second, the Navy of Brazil and the environment. And I will also present some concepts in the environmental area and also some examples of the interaction and activities of military organizations and the environment. And number 3, the environmental management of Brazil. And I will detail here the good practices that have been used right now for the control of these issues generated with the environment. And finally, number 4, the conclusion. Introduction, number 1. First of all, at this moment, we have the environmental protection system, and everybody is discussing about this throughout the world. But what is important to highlight is that the organizations of the organizations throughout the world, through their activities, try to have environmental responsibility. This means that to have a sustainable development of their activities, which at the same time protects their image in face of society, because it gives some positive impacts for their companies. We have 3 examples. We have the mining and the Taipu National Enterprise for Electric Energy and the Petrobras for oil. These 3 use a lot of natural resources, and these companies have to associate their development with a sustainable development model, because this is going to strengthen their image, as I said before, and it's going to bring a positive image from society. And in this context, the Navy of Brazil is also concerned about all this. And starting in 2002, there was a restructuring of the environmental organizations in the military of my nation. And it was determined that where I work, we have had the regulation of our techniques for the implementation and accompaniment of the environmental management based on the ISO 14001. So from there on, we've had a restructuring for the greater follow-up of the environmental impacts in the military organizations. And within this initial context, now we're going to enter into those things in which the Navy is involved. Here, we have the organizational chart of the Navy of Brazil. It is simplified, and we can see that about 300 military land organizations and about 100 ships. And within this, the structure of the Navy, we have to highlight that all these military organizations, 300 on land and 100 ships, in their daily activities, and they have an interaction with the environment. And this interaction creates a result that, thanks to the bibliography, is called the environmental aspects. And the environmental aspect, as an example, is the generation of solid residues and the garbage generated by the military institutions and liquid. And all these things that are generated by the activities that become a concern for the Navy, because these aspects need to be controlled, because if they're not controlled, they can cause a negative environmental impact. And at the same time, that we are not complying with the law. So I have placed 3 examples to illustrate the environmental aspect. So here we have the military, land, Navy organizations. These are like administrative institutions, like the port institution in Rio de Janeiro, in this building that has 400 people working in the premises. This is a military administrative institution, and also develops garbage, organic garbage and residues. And we have some recyclable residues, and there is a specific policy for this type of residues, the plastics, paper, glass, and the emissions as well of the cars that remain inside the garages, and also the batteries and the fluorescent lamps, bulbs that need to have a specific destination because they're also damaging, and the health services. So this is just an example of one environmental aspect within an administrative institution. And in the ships that are supported by the Navy bases, I'm going to give the example of a Navy base in Manaus, Amazonas. This is the satellite image of the pier of the Amazons where the ships stay. And this is the patrol ships. And these ships also generate residues, organic, common, recyclable, the health, and also oil and batteries. These are some examples, but you can see that there are quite a lot of similarities between the land and the sea type of residues. The residues caused by the ships are recollected, and there is now a control cycle, and then they're collected. We will see another example just to illustrate the military organizations at the Navy bases that maintain and repair the ships. So here you can see the Navy base in the island of Cobras in Rio. This is a picture of this complex that is located in that island that is called the Cobras. This is just an example of all the environmental aspects. And you can see that there's quite a lot of similarities with the other two examples, with some specifications like the maintenance of the ships that also generate some industrial residues. So this is a little bit different for the mission, but as a whole, the environmental aspects are quite similar among all the military organizations. So what is the focus of the Navy right now? These environmental aspects have to be controlled. And that's where we enter into number 3, which is environmental management and good practices to control these environmental aspects. Well, here we're going to detail 6 topics. The environmental management system implemented by the Navy in 2004 based on ISO 14001. This technique is international, and then the Navy started to complement its OMs, its norms and procedures to administrate an organization to improve the environmental performance of our organization, and then generate advantages like the compliance with the law, the reduction of costs, and the reduction of environmental impacts. And our main focus was to comply with the law. And we have been advancing in other aspects, but mainly our law. The chart here explains this. The main focus was the legal demand. But today, we are advancing and in good practices. So it is good to highlight that we have a certification. The Navy doesn't demand this certification, but uses it to orient people to comply with these OMs. Now we see that we have 300 OMs on land and 100 ships, as we said before. And so now we have to disseminate all these technical norms among all these and give them the orientation, because we have technical standards that are very specific for the military land organizations that talk about environmental management, the emergency plan, and audits. But there are some that are very specific for the ships that stipulate, and some others that talk about recycling, which is another topic that is very specific for the land organizations. So the important thing is that we can disseminate all these standards to the OMs of Brazil. And there is a synthesis of all these that are given to each OM so that they can follow them. We have 300 OMs. So there is a condition to maintain a control in every one of them. And we have classified these OMs based on the level of their contaminating or polluting potential. We have defined the polluting potential of each one so that we can have a better control and a more effective control of the self-containment, high potential and low potential. We have made these classification of the 3 OMs so that we can pay more attention to the ones with the highest polluting capacity. So that is how we have focused our work. So we can see that 20 OMs have a high polluting potential, and we have 81 with a mid potential and 200 with a low potential. So in this way, we have a greater control. And this is the distribution of these high potential OMs distributed here on the map. These are the largest bases with greater concentration in the Bay of Guanabara in Rio. And the 81 OMs that are also distributed here. I'm going to show you some photographs of the bases, military bases, among the 20 with the high polluting potential. This Sao Pedro Aldea, the Marine in Itiroy, the Navy base of Natal, and the Navy base in Natal. And the Rio de Janeiro base, the one that was just reactivated for submarines in Atawai, that was reactivated in 2020, and some information centers in the island of Rio. And we also have in the Angros dos Reis that are considered highly polluting and contaminating Navy bases. So we have an inspection group that does an inspection, a face-to-face inspection every 3 years. And 7 military organizations are evaluated every year. And we have also created an evaluation system with 100 requirements based on that audit. And we also have an environmental performance compliance, and we have scaled each one of these institutions from excellent to unsatisfactory. And of course, those that are excellent are awarded or rewarded, and the ones that are unsatisfactory have to work to improve themselves. These results are given to us. So in this way, we can follow up throughout the whole evaluation process of the OMs with of highly polluting potential. And now with the ones that have a medium polluting potential, we can mention the Rio de Janeiro school, the Victoria school, the Navy school. And in Ceará, we have another school, some other examples, like the hospital, Navy hospital in Rio de Janeiro, and we have the Navy school in Rio de Janeiro. which is the main school for Navy officials, and we have 68 military organizations that are the captainships of the maritime authority that accompany the inspections that all these are polluting potential OMs. So the highly polluting institutions are seen every 3 years, and we have had very good results. And every 2 years, they have to answer a survey, and then we analyze and we follow up to see if it has worked well, because it is very important to continuously evaluate and be there at the site. And we have divided it into some per years, and now we have like 200 OMs. So how are we going to control these 200 OMs? These will be based on the standards that are disseminated, and they have to comply with these standards and laws. And these OMs, if they have any difficulty, they can contact us and then ask us any questions that they might have. We can also visit them on the site. And this is the formula that we have found that is good to maintain control of these OM. Others, we have a structure that is called the environmental technical visit. These are inspections that are requested by the land OMs by their own interest at the ports to analyze some of the systems. And so we have created this as well. What is the difference between this from the audit? The audit is complete. The audit is a complete inspection and a permanent, applied only to the 20 with the highest polluting and contaminating potential. And this other one is applied to any middle or low polluting potential at their own request or at our own criteria. In 2022, we had 24 visits under this format. And now, until October, we have already carried out 23 visits. And we have one more visits and technical visits still pending until the end of the year. So this number is going to go up. So this is an example of the technical visit in Natal. This visit to the post of a fuel post that was recently installed. And we can see how it has been installed, how it works. And some items like the water separators and the water and fuel separators. And we have also visited the parking area where the cars remain, and the washing system. The emergency area, the storage area, especially for oil, some specific systems, and the stocks for fuel. So this is just an example of a visit that was carried out. We also have the emergency plans for oil that is spilled in the sea. We have an emergency standard for spills, and these are teams that are mounted and have their own procedures that have been adopted under this technical standard. And also for the ships, when they transfer the oil, there are some orientations that are used for this procedure. These are some plans for the spills at sea as well. This is an exercise this is a simulation, an emergency simulation of an OM of a highly polluting potential institution or peer. And so the emergency team arrived, and some other teams also participated to give a quick response during the simulation. And we also have some contention barriers and ships that went to help. And all these exercises are routinary in this emergency plan and for the environmental protection. To give continuity to this, we're going to talk about the environmental education that is so important because we have a national policy for environmental education in Brazil since 2009. And the Navy has incorporated all these topics on environmental education for the military as well. And we update ourselves continuously. And we have the selective collection, and there is also a legislation that says that all of the public institutions have to separate all the residues from, and then be ready for the collectors to come and collect separately the paper, the glass, the plastics, and the same thing for the ships. And how do we control this? Well, we receive a report of the different selective collections. We have a system for residues, OMs on land. This is a separation and destination, a structure that all the Navy bases have to have so that the ships give their residues separated. So this selective collection becomes easier, and since 2022 to 2023, 120 tons of metal and glass and 48 of plastic were delivered. We don't have associations in all Brazil, so there are some OMs that have to separate, but they end up in the common garbage because there's nobody to collect them. But all the OMs have some type of interaction with the environment, and these environmental aspects have to be controlled by and divided, regarding their potential to contaminate. So these controls that we carry out, and this strengthening of environmental awareness has strengthened the image of the Navy in face of the Brazilian population. And well, thank you. I'm open to questions, and sorry for taking more of your time. Thank you. We have come to the question and answers. We have received this question that we would like you to answer it. What are the criteria used to classify the military organizations as high, mid, or low polluting capacity? Thank you for your question. Normally, we don't have the capacity of accompanying all the OMs. So we have established some criteria that involve the type of residue, the amount of crew, and how much oil they carry. So there is like a score, and within this score that is weighted from the highest polluting capacity, we have ranked all the OMs that have higher potential, and the 20 with the highest potential is the ones that we audit, 7 audits a year, and then we have divided the mid potential ones, and we have 20 high and 20 mid. So that one is 1/3 of all of them, and these 80 receive surveys with a certain criteria. And they are also scored. And then we have to see which are the ones that have to be more accompanied. So that is basically what we do. So head of the Department of the Environment for the military organizations of the Navy of Brazil, on behalf of the Inter-American Defense Board, we would like to thank you for this brilliant presentation that you have provided us, and how the Navy of Brazil, with its control actions and good practices, have allowed to reduce the environmental impact in your operations. To continue, I am pleased to introduce our third panel member, Infantry Colonel José Luis Rebolledo Zaragoza, who is now head of the subsection of ecological protection of the logistics of the Joint Chief of Staff of the National Defense of Mexico. That is going to talk about the contribution of the National Defense Secretariat to help in the protection of the environment. Colonel Rebolledo, good morning. The floor is yours. Thank you very much, Colonel Orlando of Peru. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, delegates and observers of the Inter-American Defense Board, audience, both face-to-face and virtual. I am very pleased to address you in representation of the National Defense Secretary to talk about what we do to improve the environment.
Bien, mi presentación consta de una breve introducción.
My presentation is divided into an introduction, the plant production, residual water treatment, soil restoration, and reforestation. And at the end of the presentation, we will talk about the 13th plan, which is the combat of forest fires. Next. The legal foundation is in the law, Article 29, that establishes that the national defense has to dispatch the following: provide civilian services that the executive so determines, and collaborate with the environmental institutions to train the military for the execution of activities to protect the environment. When we refer to the military service, this means all the young people that carry out their voluntary and military service, and the ones that are going to be permanently there as well. As we mentioned before, the Secretary participates in different activities to protect the environment, like the restoration of soils, the treatment of residue waters, the treatment of the different plant production plants, and also the compost and reforestation in the interior of the military camps. Next. With regards to the first one, which is the plant production, in 2023, when we started
De los
the
viveros
construction of the nurseries, the military nurseries. And from 1923 to the year 2000, helped with the production of plants for the different programs like Solidarity program, the program for national reforestation, and the forestry development program. All these were plans that we contributed to. The next.
Producción de planta. La producción de planta.
The production of plants, of wood plants and agro-industrial in the military forest from 1993 has been the following. In the period from 1993 to 2000, 808 million. And we have had 291 million plants produced. The program called Life Planting is to avoid the environmental degradation. In this way, its objectives are to rescue the field, activate local economy, and generate the social tissue in the different communities. This program is in charge of the institution that establishes the rules of the same. In 2018, we signed a collaboration MO for the production of forestry and wood plants. And now we are limited to the species that the military decide in their nurseries.
Mi coronel Rebolledo, se le fue el audio.
Colonel Rebolledo, you have no audio.
Mi coronel, ¿puede prender su micro, por favor?
Bien, siguiente, por favor.
Next one, please.
Siguiente, por favor. En esta diapositiva pueden apreciar.
Here you can appreciate the different military forestry nurseries and their location.
Tenemos militares, los cuales
We have all these that produce different plants that go from 1 to 25 million. In Chiapas, for instance, the capacity is 4 million plants, and this is the property of the Ministry of Welfare, and it is administered by the military personnel. Of the 72 nurseries, only 2 have not produced plants right now because the Secretary of Welfare has not required the plants where they are established right now.
plantas tratadoras de aguas residuales.
Wastewater treatment plants. With regards to the wastewater treatment plants, the Secretary of National Defense has a total of 275 treatment plants at the urban and domestic areas from the military camps. The treatment of these wastewaters is both physical, chemical, and biological, and they comply with the laws in our country. At the same time, one of the purposes is to employ the treated water to irrigate the green areas of the different military plantations and for general uses, optimizing the use of potable water. We have treated 16.6 million cubic meters, and one of the objectives is to reduce the levels of contamination that are created due to the use of water in our plants. We have treated 81 million cubic meters of wastewaters in 264 plants that we have.
Siguiente, por favor.
Next.
Restauración de suelos.
Soil restoration. With regards to the compost
Orgánico.
or organic fertilizer, we have 53 plants for compost installed in our military camps. The production of this fertilizer is from the organic waste created in our military installations to regenerate the soil in our camps and to reduce the chemicals used to fertilize our soil, contributing in this way to the flora and the green areas of our military installations in an organic manner. From 2017, we have produced 20,732 compost tons.
Reforestación. Sobre
Deforestation. Regarding these activities, they're carried out until 2018 with CONAFOR. And since the plants are part of the plan called Planting Life of the National Defense, it is only inside the military camps that we do this, and sometimes at the schools or areas where they require it to support these activities. This year, we planted 259,000 trees in our military camps. And from 2023 on, we have planted more than 2 million trees in 4,700 hectares.
Protección en video. Además de coadyuvar al cuidado y protección del medio ambiente.
Besides working for the environment, we have the 3C plan that consists in helping in natural disasters using the units that we have for this purpose. The main phenomena that we have worked with are earthquakes and climate change and forest fires and some other meteorological disasters. And the system participates in all of these. And we have the material and the equipment that is necessary to do this.
Me permitiría dar unas breves conclusiones.
I would like to give some brief conclusion remarks. The Secretary, in accordance with our law, help in the actions mentioned to take care of the environment, and also helps to achieve the goals of the nation for the sustainable economic, social, and environmental sustainability of our country, contained in the National Plan for Development from 2019 to 2024. And the experts in this subject will determine if the actions are sufficient or if we have to redouble our efforts. Likewise, with this information, we hope to have complied with the objectives of this conference and to be able to feed the actions that you're carrying out, because the National Defense Secretariat contribute to the strengthening of the environment. I thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that if you have any questions, you may ask them. I'm here available for you. Colonel Rebolledo, this is the period of interaction with the audience, and we have a question. What other benefits does the program Planting Life, implemented by the federal government, give the society of Mexico? Yes, it is a pleasure to answer your question, because it helps all the peasants and the farmers to follow what we do, because we are using the model of planting trees together with the farming crops that they are traditionally planting. And we give them the technical accompaniment and the necessary tools for the peasants. Colonel of Infantry, Jose Luis Rebolledo Zaragoza, on behalf of the Inter-American Defense Board, we would like to thank you for the time that you have provided us to share how the National Defense Secretary of Mexico, through the different programs implemented, and that contributes to the protection of our environment. Thank you very much. Dear audience, we're going to take a break, a 10-minute break at this moment, and after we will continue with the presentations. If
Retomando el periodo de presentaciones de la conferencia, tengo la complacencia en presentarles a nuestra siguiente panelista, la señora Débora Maestre, quien es la oficial de proyectos de la Unidad de Reducción de la Oferta de la Comisión Interamericana para el Control del Abuso de Drogas, de la Organización de los Estados Americanos, quien nos presentará el tema, la necesidad de reducir el impacto ambiental causado por la fabricación ilícita de drogas en las Américas.
To the illegal manufacturing of drugs in the Americas.
Señora Maestre, bienvenida.
Welcome.
De la palabra.
You have the floor.
Muy buenos días. Primeramente quisiera agradecer.
Good morning. First, I would like to thank.
¿Se escucha la interpretación? Muy buenos días a todos. Primeramente quisiera agradecer a la Junta Interamericana de Defensa por la invitación a ser parte de esta actividad tan importante y necesaria en materia de protección del medio ambiente. Asimismo, también felicitarlos por la excelente organización de la actividad. Durante mi presentación me voy a enfocar en los siguientes aspectos. Primero, en el impacto que el tráfico y la fabricación ilícita de drogas tienen en general sobre el medio ambiente. Luego, sobre el impacto que la fabricación ilícita de drogas tiene en particular sobre el medio ambiente. Para esto les contaré brevemente el rol de los precursores químicos, así como los desafíos que estas sustancias implican para las agencias regulatorias y las fuerzas de seguridad de los Estados miembros de la OEA. A modo de cierre de la presentación, les comentaré las herramientas que la CICAD ha desarrollado en el último tiempo con el fin de ayudar a los Estados miembros a abordar los desafíos ambientales asociados con esta problemática. Los efectos negativos de las drogas ilícitas en la salud pública, la seguridad y la sociedad son ampliamente reconocidos. Las tendencias que se observan a nivel mundial complican aún más el panorama. Por ejemplo, la producción de cocaína está en un nivel récord y las incautaciones de drogas sintéticas se han disparado. Además, los mercados ilícitos de drogas se están expandiendo a nuevas regiones que son más vulnerables. El narcotráfico está asociado a violencia y a otros crímenes y tienen efectos desestabilizadores con costos sociales y económicos que obstaculizan el desarrollo sostenible. Más allá de estos efectos negativos que son bien conocidos por todos, recientemente se ha incrementado el interés en comprender cómo el tráfico y la fabricación ilegal de drogas afecta al medio ambiente. Por el momento los datos son limitados y relativamente hay pocos estudios académicos. Lo que sí se sabe es que si bien la industria de las drogas ilícitas puede representar una pequeña contribución a la huella ambiental total a nivel global, puede tener una repercusión muy importante a nivel local. En este sentido, todo el ciclo de las drogas, esto es, el cultivo, la producción, la fabricación, la distribución, el tráfico e incluso el consumo, tiene repercusiones sobre el medio ambiente. Si hablamos en particular de las acciones vinculadas a la oferta de drogas, los efectos directos sobre el medio ambiente que se pueden mencionar son la contaminación del aire, la deforestación, el consumo de energía, la contaminación y el agotamiento de nutrientes del suelo y la contaminación del agua. Sin embargo, es importante destacar que estos efectos tendrán también repercusiones indirectas, lo que provocará una afección aún mayor del medio ambiente. Por ejemplo, los cultivos ilícitos provocan la deforestación. Sin embargo, la deforestación, consecuentemente, llevará a la pérdida de biodiversidad. Respecto del cultivo ilícito de drogas naturales, al igual que sucede con otros cultivos agrícolas, estos pueden afectar el agua y el suelo. El uso intensivo de fertilizantes y pesticidas pueden tener efectos negativos en los organismos que viven en el agua y en el suelo. Además, los cultivos ilícitos también suelen tener lugar en áreas ambientales protegidas, como parques nacionales y reservas forestales, donde los ecosistemas son particularmente frágiles. Cuando hablamos del término huella de carbono, nos referimos a la cantidad de gases de efecto invernadero que se invierten a la atmósfera a causa de actividades humanas. En este sentido, la huella de carbono de la cocaína puede desglosarse en las diferentes actividades. El cultivo del arbusto de coca, que representa un 60% de la huella, la extracción del alcaloide de la hoja, que representa un 24%, y la eliminación de los residuos de la fabricación, que representa un 14%. La huella de carbono por kilogramo de cocaína fabricada es significativamente mayor que la de otros cultivos ilícitos. Por ejemplo, es 30 veces mayor que la del cacao y 2.600 veces mayor que la de la caña de azúcar. Además del impacto de los cultivos ilícitos sobre el medio ambiente, también tenemos que mencionar la fabricación ilícita de drogas. El impacto de la fabricación ilícita de drogas está dado principalmente por la manera en la que los desechos químicos son eliminados por las organizaciones criminales. El desecho de los químicos, al igual que veíamos con el tema de los cultivos, puede tener efectos significativos en el suelo, el agua y el aire, pero también efectos indirectos sobre los organismos, los animales y la cadena trófica. Por ejemplo, para tener una idea de magnitudes, en la fabricación ilícita de metanfetamina, que es una droga estimulante, tras producir 1 kilogramo de droga, se generan entre 5 y 7 kilogramos de residuos químicos. Recién mencionaba el término precursores químicos, que es una noción muy importante cuando hablamos de fabricación ilícita de drogas. Se define como precursor químico aquellas sustancias químicas que por sus características físico y químicas pueden ser utilizadas en la fabricación ilícita de drogas. Las drogas pueden catalogarse por varias clasificaciones diferentes y una de ellas es según el origen. Podemos decir que tenemos drogas de origen natural, de origen semisintético y de origen sintético. A excepción de casos muy puntuales, como es el caso, por ejemplo, del cannabis, para todas las demás drogas se requiere de precursores químicos. Por ejemplo, cuando hablamos de drogas de origen natural, para extraer la cocaína que se encuentra presente en la hoja del arbusto de coca, se requieren varios pasos, es decir, varias reacciones químicas. De igual manera, lo que ocurre con la cocaína en la hoja de coca, sucede con la dormidera, que es la amapola de la que se extrae el opio. Por su parte, las drogas sintéticas también requieren precursores químicos para su fabricación, pero a diferencia de las de origen natural, no necesitan un material vegetal de partida. Aquí quisiera mencionar que la fabricación de drogas naturales tiene un impacto ambiental similar al de las drogas sintéticas, ya que en ambos casos se utiliza una gran variedad de precursores químicos para obtener el producto final. Estas sustancias químicas que les mencionaba, los precursores, son sustancias que tienen amplios usos lícitos, es decir, se emplean en muchísimas industrias, no solo en la química y en la farmacéutica, sino también en la alimentaria, en perfumes, en plaguicidas, en la industria automotriz, entre otras. Por lo tanto, no pueden prohibirse, sino que deben controlarse. En este sentido, el marco para el control de los precursores químicos está dado por la Convención de las Naciones Unidas de 1988, tratado del cual los países de las Américas son signatarios y por lo tanto deben cumplir con las disposiciones allí escritas. No obstante, en la Convención de 1988 no hay plasmados lineamientos que definan cómo deben tratarse los precursores químicos incautados. Como mencioné anteriormente, la fabricación ilícita de drogas suele emplear una gran variedad y cantidad de precursores, independientemente de si se trata de un origen natural o de origen sintético. Para ilustrar esto, les traigo el caso de la cocaína. Según el Informe Mundial de las Drogas 2023 de la Oficina de las Naciones Unidas contra la Droga y el Delito, la fabricación de cocaína a nivel mundial alcanzó un máximo histórico en 2021, que es el último año para el que se tienen datos, con un crecimiento de 16% respecto a 2020. Para fabricar esas 2.304 toneladas de clorhidrato de cocaína puro, las organizaciones criminales han de haber empleado aproximadamente 4 millones de
Approximately 4 emissions of sulfuric acid and 860 tons of and 7 chloride hydrate liters. So this is the magnitude of the chemical precursors that we're talking about when we talk about needing a lot to do the amount of drugs that are being manufactured today. Therefore, dilemma goes beyond the increase of chemicals. It is a corrosive type of element, very contaminant. And this situation of the drug trafficking, in which the production of cocaine has scaled to levels without precedent, and the reutilization of more precursors, and in consequence, this leads to the generation of a greater volume of chemical wastes. Although we need more investigations to understand the environmental impact of the manufacturing of drugs, its cause is the great spills. The drug producers throw garbage in two ways. And through spills, that is the elimination of chemicals in some type of container, like a plastic barrel or a metal barrel, as we can see in the storage room that we have at the left, while the discharges are the liquid waste that are discharged on land or into the water. The difference between a discharge and spill is very important when we talk about the environment, because in the spills they're visible and eventually they can be identified and neutralized by the governments. And the discharges are invisible. And this is why they are the more common cause of damage, because they leave them directly exposed. At the same time, since the government cannot identify what substance was spilled, then we needed the following steps to avoid the environmental damage. And besides, with regards to the discharges, the chemical discharges can extend to large distances, affecting not only the communities that are close by, but also contaminating the rivers and the water supplies that are at quite a distance. So the criminals can also incinerate chemical residues and wastes, as you can see at the left here. And this can provoke health problems in the nearby populations. Although up to here, we're talking about the precursors as spills that are discharged by the criminal organizations. On some occasions, the security forces are forced to destroy these chemical precursors. And this is known as the in situ destruction. And because the clandestine are at their distance away, and then they can use it for their own purposes.
Siguiente, por favor.
The next one, please.
Si bien dijimos que
Although we said
se pueden,
that
muchas veces los laboratorios
many
clandestinos
times the
pueden
clandestine labs
destruirse en el
should be
lugar,
destroyed,
otras veces no.
sometimes no,
Estos son
these
incautados.
chemical precursors are
Otras veces
seized.
no están asociados
And sometimes they're not related
por ejemplo,
to the
nuestra
clandestine
ruta
labs, but
se
maybe
detecta
to
un
route control,
precursores
and then we can detect a
incautados.
truck full of
Entonces,
these
ese
barrels and
documento,
then seize it.
el impacto
So
ambiental
this
asociado a la
documented
explotación
the
de los precursores
environmental
químicos es
impact
ejemplar por las
associated
agencias
to
regulatorias y la
chemical
empresa de seguridad.
precursors
Lo que
is
es fundamental darles un tratamiento
fundamental
adecuado.
to
¿Y cuál es el
use it
camino
and
que
give it
siguen
an
los
adequate
precursores
treatment.
químicos?
So what is the path of
Como
these
dijimos, tras la
seized
incautación
precursors?
puede
As we
suceder
said,
la
after the
destrucción in situ.
seizure, we can
En
destroy
ese
it in
sentido,
situ.
es muy
In
importante
this
tener en
sense, it is very
consideración
important to have the
mejores
consideration
prácticas
of
para
the
la
good
gestión inmediata de los
practices for
precursores,
the immediate
respecto a
management of
comunidades, uso de
the
agua, suelos, etc.
precursors so that
Para
they
eso
don't
es
affect the
necesario
soil
relaciones
or the water.
laboratorio
And for this, it is very important
colaboración
to collaborate with the CICAD, and we developed some operational guides for this purpose. The document was published in 2006 and was updated in 2011. If the precursors can be seized and don't have to be destroyed in situ, then the stages that are carried out by the security forces are the transportation, the storage, and the later elimination. Each one of these stages represents one challenge for the members of the OAS because of the high costs that these stages generate when they're done privately, or because they require trained staff for the management of these dangerous substances, and because you also need a legislation for their elimination, and storage becomes a long-term storage, and this represents a danger depending on the sites where they are located, because sometimes they're not well ventilated or they don't have the appropriate standards. In virtue of the challenges that this entails with regards to the chemicals from the CICAD, and particularly from the unit, we have approached the countries of the region with the objective for them to strengthen their capacities. At the unit, we work in different themes. One is the control of chemicals and some dangerous substances, and support the member states of the OAS to strengthen their capabilities in face of the growing manufacturing of these precursors and illegal substances. And besides the training and technical assistance, we have a group of experts on these members of the CICAD that regulates the institutions that are in charge of the chemical precursors, not only the administrative authorities, but also the police that are responsible for this. And the group facilitates the exchange of updated information and good practices and experiences. And at the same time, it develops some tools and reference materials that serve as a support for the state members to be able to strengthen their regulatory frameworks through the regional and different standards on this policy. And I would like to stop here because the group is working to give answer to the final elimination of precursors, because if the countries don't eliminate these substances adequately, this could really cause a very important environmental impact. That's why it is important to support the countries to take care of this issue in an environmentally responsible way. With regards to the materials developed by the experts in this issue, I would like to mention the following. In 2022, we had a regional diagnostic that allowed to get to know all the challenges and best practices found by the countries in the storage and final disposition of the seized chemicals. And the majority of the countries had faced great challenges, but we identified very good practices as well that can be implemented by other countries to solve the certain challenges. Therefore, within the findings of this diagnosis, we stressed on the importance of regional cooperation for the countries that have good practices to be able to show them to the other countries so that they can evaluate what they're doing. At the same time, the diagnosis also included the analysis of the laws of each country. So it is important to have regulations that can cover this topic. Here, we are talking about the complexity of the final disposition because it's not only standards or regulations that have an implication, but also the environmental laws and the waste laws. Given the differences found between the different standards in each country for the final disposal of seized products, we can say that which is the best option for the final disposition of chemicals is a part of an evaluation that each country has to carry out depending on the characteristics of each one and their own legal policies. Following the line of work from 2022 to 2023, the group of experts worked in a reference line for the countries on which are the issues that have to be taken into consideration to develop the standards referent to the final disposal of chemical precursors that, as I said, was one of the main challenges considered in the first analysis. In this way, the guide works as a protocol that can be followed for the conditioning or transportation and storage and the final disposition of the seized chemicals. And besides, it also has several recommendations on security to avoid the re-entering of these seized precursors into the markets. All the text was drafted taking into account all the best practices found in the diagnosis of 2022. If everything goes as planned, the guideline is going to be approved in the meeting of the CICAD in December this year. And from there, it will be available for everyone to use. With this, I finish my presentation, and I want to thank you very much for your attention. And once again, I thank the Minister of Defense of Peru for their very kind invitation to participate in this today. Thank you very much. We're going to start our interaction with the following question. Can you answer this question that we received on the chat, which is, what are the final disposition of chemical precursors that are the most friendly with the environment? Thank you very much for your question. There are final disposal methods that are more friendly with the environment than others. For instance, we can find the encapsulation and also some landfills. But the problem with these two final disposal methods is that they're only applicable to certain substances, not all of them. And so what has been considered with other countries, such as methods of final friendly disposition of precursors, the donation of these chemical precursors. We have to remember that as a difference of the drugs, these have some legal uses. So it is better to send them back to the legal circuit so that they can be recycled and instead of destroyed. Deborah Maestre, a project official of the unit of the reduction of the offer of the National Commission for the Control of Abuse of Drugs of the OAS. On behalf of the Inter-American Board of Defense, we want to thank you for the time that you have offered, sharing your knowledge and stressing the importance of the struggle against the illegal manufacturing of drugs and the control sanctions on chemical precursors that contribute to the protection of the environment. The next part, I have the honor of presenting our fifth panel member, Brigadier from the National Army of Colombia, Cesar Augusto Barreló, who right now is working for the Embassy of Colombia in the United States and who will deal with the topic role of the military forces in the environmental protection and the strengthening of the environmental governments in the Amazon zone. General Parra, good morning. The audience is yours.
Buenos días, presento un cordial saludo al señor embajador.
Thank you for introducing the ambassador and the military attaches and my colleague Garcia from the OAS and my colleagues from the Embassy of Colombia that are here with us, and our ambassador Gilberto Murillo, who has to do with the military forces, and with our director that is here with us as well. And the military forces in the Amazon governance program, we have to see the location of Colombia that is located in South America with 2 oceans and a very important division with the United States in a bilateral relationship that is a part of the lung of the world. And we are a part of the countries that have very important characteristics. And we have a problem that has to do with the deforestation of 19% of this area of the Amazon due to the environmental crimes. And in this logic of each government that generates policies for the plan 2022-2023, which has a focus on security and defense and the drug policy, taking into account that the basis of this relationship is streamlining, and we have the relationship of community and state, and also the peace process with a very important aspect that the environmental agenda and the climate change is a strategic line, both of the national security policy and the drug policy for the transformation and the change for the well-being of our civilian population. So this is a strategic line in our state and the United Nations that is always based on this focus of the reduction of the gases to improve all the activities and in all the meetings that we have on climate change, in which we state very important issues, and also the focus that we have in the national plan, because we have the reordering for the climate change and reforestation to generate tourism and an important environment. The articulation of the Ministry of the Environment and the Ministry of Defense with all this seeks to contribute precisely to the best use of all the environment and to create a campaign throughout the region to protect all the natural resources. And we see that before we had the developed countries generating some policies in the different conventions to reduce the green gases and the different grades, and we see how there have been some affectations with the climate change and in the tropics. And because people cut the trees, and we have some territories that are not owned by anyone, and this creates a problem in countries like Colombia. So what are the main focus of deforestation? Because we have a mountain range that is very important, and people take the land illegally. And as we all know, this problem and how we generate the problems of tree cutting in our forests that causes so many problems in our country. And these are aspects that we have to focus on as the Environment Ministry. And the loss of the forest in Colombia, if you can see how many forests we have lost year by year, we have been increasing deforestation. And this is a map of Colombia, the map of Colombia, where right now we have a classification on how the deforestation has increased and what are the departments where we don't have any forest anymore. And we also see the example that is very important on how the military forces, together with their institutional articulation, can generate importance in the territory, especially in the area of Caquetá, a department of that has had an armed conflict in the last 50 years. We have had a hybrid governability in this area with the armed groups. And the affectation to the population has been great because we have had a vacuum of power in these areas, and they take advantage of this, and then they have continued with the drug trafficking and many crimes in this area. And that's where the state of Colombia has tried to strengthen the territory. So this example of the Caquetá and illegal mining leads to increase the problem of climate change. The conflicts for land, the problem of sustainability and natural disasters that we all know and that we have all seen in the last years. And for this, the military forces has been very important because they have neutralized this for many years. And we have articulated ourselves in the distant areas of the countries where there is no space, where there is no state, where there is no law. And we have carried out important articulation with all the institutions of the state in those areas where we have early alerts of these violent groups. And we have been able to support the different ministries through our air force and the land forces. And we articulate this environmental bubble. And the example is the program that we have been leading for many years through a strategic line to help the population and recover the lost land and stop the illegal trafficking and strengthen the environment in these territories. These are the objectives of the Ministry of the Environment, supported with the Ministry of the Environment in everything that talks about the articulation of projects and plans. So now the armed forces play a very important place in this, in the combat of the Ministry of the Environment, the armed forces, but not only to intervene in these, but also to look for the strengthening of other type of organizations that we will see later on, supporting and controlling. And this is very important because we have to train our men so that they can see what are the problems that we have, with the transport of wood, the transport of chloride, the transport of chemicals, and what we can do to avoid this. So especially in the centers where we train our people. So this is the timeline of this organization. This transcended and is now a national decree This line has allowed us to take international cooperation like Norway and Germany and some other countries. And here you can see the different activities that we have complied with. And this has led to look for the stabilization of the territory from the illegal to the legal. And this has been a very important transition that can generate the different countries and to recover the territories. And this is very important. As you can see, we have 4,000 members of the Air Force that have been trained both in the armed forces and the police, and the air reconnaissance has been incredible. We employ all these important campaigns, and to continue, I want to show you some of the videos that show how we can articulate the institutionality with the collaborative governance of the countries. And there's also another line that shows the stabilization of the territory in the Taquetá. That is a very difficult area of our country. And we started with this in 2016, and it has had a very important transcendence. And we have had many visits from the from foreign countries, and we will listen to some videos. Mute Samantha.
Parece una iniciativa muy interesante.
This is a very interesting initiative, and this is
Inédito en el combate a la
something never heard of.
deforestación, es
In
algo
combat against
nuevo.
deforestation, this is something new.
No he visto así. Antes a lo menos no conozco ejemplos que
I don't
indiquen
know
esta constelación de
examples that
instituciones que
indicate
van coordinadas y
these
juntas
considerations,
a combatir focos de
and
deforestación.
or
He's talking
very
about how they're
interesting because they're
combating
going to combat
deforestation in the area.
deforestation.
We have a great interest in the protection of the nature and climate change, and we are a great partner of the Colombian government. And so we have several projects here in Colombia. For instance, we are a partner of the Amazonia. This is a great program to get funds for the peasants
and there's
and
other groups here in Amazonia.
The area of the Amazonia. Our mission is a multinational mission.
Me parece que es un proyecto extremadamente
I
ambicioso.
think that this is a project that is extremely ambitious and well done, because in reality, it is the army, but the army with the local authorities, the population, and all the people here, and the different producer associations. So this is very original because it is not a security project, it is an inclusion project. It is a sustainable context to protect the whole society through peace and inclusion. And so this is the objective. So we have seen in the presentation this morning that the general gave, and I loved it because it is a colossal
huge challenge
for
security challenge in the fight against traffickers. But at least in my opinion, it's a very interesting project. There's a trend now, not only in Colombia, but also in reconciliation or post-conflict. Like here, there's a trend to change the role that an army can take care of. It's not only combating, it's not only war, but also stabilization. I think that the challenge that exists and that I see in the rest of the world is that there's a moment in which there are other civil authorities that have to, police, mayors, and the army can play a very important role. I've seen this many areas, so maybe this is preliminary to the normality situation. The important thing is to work with civil authorities, but it's multi-mission. Our mission is Colombia, National Army.
the purpose of counteracting the threat that represents the focus of undiscriminate felling of the forest and the bubble of deforestation and the environment led in the Caquetá Department by the 6th Division of Army with the 6th Brigade. We promote the project of the zones that are more affected, the interagency initiative that the Corporation for Sustainable Development of the South of Amazonia, Corpoica, is making. And the SINCH institution has a pilot project in the Engineers Battalion number 12, Ivorio Mejia, where they implemented a that has a capacity to provide 1,500 plants as different sorts of trees, and the material for is done by the Alexander Vargas Castaño, which picked these plants or these seeds up in the non-technical study, and through the selection, they're taken to the germination area to promote them. This is allowed to promote deforestation campaigns on the part of the educational sources in Aguasa and Nosante River. When the greenhouse is promoted and or the nursery is greater, we will promote the plants and to contribute to mitigate the impact of deforestation, promoting advanced to sustainable availability and improving environmental governance. With what you just saw and heard, it is the institutional articulation, it's the effort of the state, all the entities that are working without any political interest, but taking on the mission that we always comply, taking advantage of each one of these entities. Is what we are doing at this time under the leadership of the President and the Ministry of the Environment. This is a real example, an example supported by the European Union. It's an example of coordination of how we see the sustainable issues and time, environmental, are coordinating societies, the communities, but the projects are productive. And here we see how the countries are coordinated and the municipalities are not cultivating coca, but they cultivate now coffee, and these are being exported by the countries. That we see all of the different stakeholders on this slide. This is a coordinated effort that we're making, and this is being done as a joint project. What are the conclusions? That our military forces play an important role and the national and international context. We have prepared, trained, that guide their efforts together with the national police. Currently, the monitoring and the capacity of the armed forces is large. They're aligned with the NASA and the capacity of monitoring, and all the articulated work is going to be done together. This, as I said at the beginning, goes from military control to institution control of the territory with the dynamics and with the coordination of plans and bringing trust in the communities. And we have to work with the integrity of the environment, and they're all well coordinated. So this is what we're going to achieve, an important issue. This is articulated with the NASA Aero Special Force, articulated by NASA, and they're carrying out different activities. We also have a challenge. These are the challenges that we have, important challenges in the military forces, is to support, to comply the foreseen national environmental conservation objectives, and to bring to food security and help the ecosystems and the areas in the territories to work together with all of the entities. Basically, this is the work of the military forces, and this is what we're looking for. And from here on, we continue to work importantly in the territories. I conclude with saying, this is Colombia. I want you to know all of the chain of mountain chains in Colombia, and I invite you again to see this video, and thank you so much.
más lindo que tiene Colombia?
What is the best that Colombia offers? What is its true beauty? Here, the people are everything, because besides navigating through a river that escapes in the ocean to go into the ocean, you can hear more than 65 indigenous tribes' languages. How will a country not be gorgeous where you can try a different fruit the 365 days of the year? Thanks to the hands of our farmers that bring food to the table of the Colombians and tables of the whole world. We are very proud of our 3 mountain ranges, but much more so of our cyclists that conquer them in the highest mountain chain of the world. The wind sounds like a progress. It's the same wind that speaks to 1,900 species of birds and to see what trees they have to go to be seen. From our 12 oceans and islands we make the union of two people. Look at our mountains and look at the hectares that still need to be cultivated. And talking about green, it breathes. Breathe quietly, because we are of the world. We live among the beauty that changes every day, where the past, present, and future lives in each region. A generous beauty, so for whoever wants to take a look at it, the one that comes for business stays for pleasure, and the one who comes for pleasure finds business and stays for business. So the invitation is this one: come for the first time, or come back from where you are and go throughout the country so that you can continue discovering Colombia, the country of the beauties. I know that the one that didn't know Colombia will have to come to Colombia. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It is absolutely important to mention that we have more than 2,000 participants that have been registered from Colombia, which means the importance of the citizens from the Republic of Colombia to this important topic. And in concordance, we have received a question from our audience that asks, how do the military forces combat the environmental crimes at the borders? Colombia, at this time, the military forces and national police have working in coordination, and they're working with the borders of Brazil. And right now we have financial agreements with the countries to see what are the threats that we have in transnational crimes and drug traffic, everything that generates human trafficking. They're working on intelligence and operationals. They have to coordinate between the countries in the special borders and expand the capacities to be able to carry out affiliations that have been generated and to be able to mitigate the risks that are giving social problems. They have coordinated the chancellery to work hand in hand with social programs to be able to reach the populations that are there with the capacity that they can work, that they can help. It's a very good question, but I want to say that there's an important aspect from our president and everyone that has to do with the security of the borders. Brigadier General of the National Army of Colombia, Cesar Augusto Parra León, Minister Counselor for the Embassy of Colombia in the United States. On behalf of the Inter-American Defense Board, we want to thank you for all of the teachings that you have imparted, highlighting the multi-sectoral part of Colombia and protection of the environment, where the military actions exercise an important influence, promoting coordination of the state and other countries. Following, I have the honor of presenting our sixth panel member, Captain Frigate Dr. Patrick Patterson. who currently is Associate Dean Research and Publications of the Hemispheric Study Centers of the Sun, William J. Perry, who will talk about climate change and the role of the armed forces. Captain, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about such an important topic. General Amaranthus, ladies and gentlemen, and participants that are in the virtual. I'm Patrick Patterson, and I'm a professor at the Perry Center in Washington. This is an academic center that is serving all of the 34 countries of the region and working for climate change, and also working at the Secretary of Defense office in the United States. For 20 minutes, more or less, I would like to share with you some of the information about climate change that we're studying, and the classes here at the National Defense University in Washington, and where we have the participants of the government, representatives of the region. Before continuing, I would like to say that these are scientific organizations. I'm not using information of the news, but most of the slides, like IPCC, the International Climate ICCC, and at the bottom you can see of the slide, you can see the references. It's so important to be here with you. To continue, it is very important to understand that besides the efforts of the governments, the news about climate change is very sad. It's a very urgent topic besides the promises from our government that our governments have made during the conference of the parties in Paris in 2015. The amount of greenhouse gases are still suffering. The gases in the atmosphere are increasing, and with this, the temperatures of the planet. This year, in 2023, was the most painful in history, and we had the World Meteorological Organization, the OMM, predicted that the next 5 years will be the hottest of the history of humanity. And in the graphic, you can see that we have already reached 1.1 Celsius degrees. That is the average temperatures of the 19th century. And you can see the trajectory about the amount of temperatures that we are suffering nowadays. According to IPCC, we shall have temperatures for this decade and you can imagine where we are, what we're looking at. The conference of party in December of 2015, the scientists of this organization and of the IPCC, 100 scientists of different countries also mentioned that we must prevent as possible to avoid crossing 1.5 degrees Celsius. Above that red line, we shall have many more catastrophes, many more natural disasters, many more storms, droughts, and other issues due to climate change. Maybe the question is, where are we going towards this century? And according to the information of IPCC, I'm going to come back to that slide, but the information is not good because of all of the news from this hemisphere. We have challenges with regards to climate change, and they're going to share a report from the group of scientists that are studying each one of the countries according to the risks and vulnerability of our countries. There are three categories, more or less: the danger, vulnerability, and the lack of capacity to face these issues. And the map built by the Perry Center's Antonio Cito from the University of Washington State. You can see the red colors on the map, or orange or in yellow, the level of danger and vulnerabilities of these countries. And this, the name of this report is called INFORM, which the name is at the bottom of this slide. The groups that are the most vulnerable, the vulnerable groups of these groups of climate change are obviously people who are living within the margins of the farmers, the poor farmers, and elderly, pregnant women, youth, immigrants that have fled from their homes because the people that do not have, they cannot work anymore, that are people who are working in open air every day. And very important, the amount of police and soldiers that need to work and under these difficult conditions. How can we protect our soldiers because they are sustainably working under these very difficult climate conditions? I mentioned the poor people in the slide and the unfortunate news about the rate of poverty in many parts of our hemisphere is very poor because many parts of Central America, for example, the rate of poverty is more than 60% in some cases. In Central America, similarly, the rate of poverty in South America, where the average of poverty is 32% on average, if we are not counting Uruguay and Chile. But the great majority of the people in our countries in South America are living in this line of under this line of poverty. So what do we need to do to prevent these issues in the next decades? First of all, we need to change our system of fossil fuels, and we need to change these systems to clean energy, renewable energy. And that's the first part. Of the next one, we need to decarbonize the atmosphere of this contamination that has been created. It's very important to understand that we do not need to prevent all of the energy that we're producing through our energy and in this energy industry. But we must reach net zero emissions because what we are creating is similar to the amount of pollution that we are eliminating from the atmosphere. So these two tasks are extremely large and very difficult, but it is absolutely necessary to do and change our systems to our current system to clean energy. Many countries in the region are already starting with this. Here in the United States, for example, the government is mobilized to reduce the amount of contamination and change our transport systems and others. Where do these sources of greenhouse gases come from? According to IPCC, this is slightly different depending on the country, but for the most amount of contamination comes from our industry systems, more or less 34%. The energy generation systems, more or less 24%. Also, in particular, in Latin America, most of the issues are the contamination come from the system of deforestation that the general mentioned during his presentation, or agriculture and animals. And here in the United States, most of the contamination comes from our transport system, commercial flights and trucks, buses, etc. It is different per country, it's different by region, but in general, this is more or less the amount of contamination produced by the different systems in our communities. Each country, each government, and the government Paris Accords have determined to are determined to reduce contamination in each one of the countries, and all of the countries around the world are trying to reduce this contamination as through promises and commitments that are called nationally determined contributions, NDC. And this is the amount of countries in South America and the amount or the percentage that they have mentioned that they promise that they will reduce. You can also see the same amount of percentage reduction in Mexico and Central American nations. Also, the countries in the Caribbean nations, and other countries in the hemisphere, such as Canada and in the United States, the government has promised to reduce the emissions by 52% of contamination by the end of this decade. This is a promise, a very ambitious promise, nearly a level of for all the efforts by the agents of the government to reduce this levels of contaminations in our country. Going back to the topic of the armed forces, I have the next 5 slides to talk about the role that the military forces and security forces play to do things to protect. First of all, I think it's very important to protect our facilities. If we do not have energy or potable water, it is not possible to carry out the military tasks. We need, in particular, for the facilities and naval bases that are close to the coast, we need to prepare for the increase of the level of the ocean, and also forecast from the scientists of the IPCC, we shall have 0.5 meters of waters more and the coasts during this century, and otherwise we shall have an increase of the level of the ocean at 2 meters. Most of our countries are located next to the coast, and they have the benefits of the fisheries and others, and 2 meters of water, an increase in the levels of the ocean is enormous. We also need to confirm and guarantee that we have these services and also that we have energy or desalination plants to produce potable water for the police and the soldiers. The second category, everything from the countries in our hemisphere already participating in a response to natural disaster, to earthquakes, hurricanes, and others. In the future, in my opinion, we need to have the response much more prepared response for humanitarian reasons. Maybe we need to have a greater rapid reaction forces with engineers in particular to collaborate in these efforts, plus also efforts from firemen, medicine, and logistic distribution of basic human needs such as water, medicines, and the climate protection for people who are displaced from their homes. Campaign hospitals for the benefits of the people who need to survive when they're outside of their homes for some time, and search and rescue forces. The third category is that we shall have in our community here in Washington. Climate change is a multiplier of threats. Countries or governments that they don't have sufficient resources. We shall have greater problems with people are mad, so we shall probably be having civil disturbances. And many of the military forces in the region are already participating in the control of civil disturbance and protests of the civilians, and we need to prepare much better for this in the following month. The lack of potable water and the lack of food is also a very big, deep concern. Similarly, in our national security strategy in the United States, a lack of of food is a great concern for us. Very important to have information on the civil society who is working and is very working under particular areas. And next area is on environmental security, which is a topic of this conference, of today's conference. Many of the panelists have already mentioned the issue of illegal felling and illegal fishing, etc., or contamination that is occurring in the different areas of Brazil and Colombia. And the final category, the problem with illegal migration or internal displacement of people who have had their homes destroyed because of these situations. Important is to have the representatives of the marine forces and armed forces, and we need to also have maritime patrols on high seas of people who are trying to flee from their countries. So to conclude, going back to this question, $100 million question, according to the IPCC, this organization of scientists, 100 scientists of our countries, that in the future we shall have problems, very difficult problems. The forecast of the United Nations is, are we going to reach to 3.2 degrees Celsius as of the next century? Remember, in Paris, the scientists told us that we shouldn't even cross a 1.1 degrees centigrade line. And this report from last year, we are headed to crossing 3.2. And in the next century, but we have very difficult conditions and we need to stay below the line of 1.5 degrees centigrade. And because our humans, the human beings are the most important part of our lives. So we need to take important and immediate actions to prevent these things from happening. To conclude, I'd like to use a reference of our National Security Strategy of the United States, which was issued in October 2022. The president said that of all of the shared problems that we have, climate change is the biggest and possibly of very existential problem. It's very important to understand that the government of the United States is talking about the risk of extinction of human beings. I'd like to share these slides with you. And in particular, the most useful for you is the reports from United Nations on climate change. The reports are in English, Spanish, and all of the different languages of the area. And they're ready to, you can download the links. They have 3 types of groups. Chapters 12 and 15 are talk about regions and countries, and also in the United States, our scientists are publishing many reports. The 5th analysis on climate change is ready to be published, and I would imagine that in about 2-3 weeks it will be published. Thank you very much for your questions. And you can also write to me to my email at the university. Thank you very much, Mr. Patterson. We shall now go to the question period. According to your experience regarding the role that the armed forces and the security forces play in the prevention and mitigation of the climate change effects, and with regards to the measures adopted, can you share with us lessons learned or good practices adopted by these institutions in Latin America? Yes, absolutely. During the conference this morning, we heard many examples from Colombia and other countries, and we have participants from Canada talking about their experiences. There are many experiences that the other countries have launched, and maybe Honduras, for example, the Green Battalions, that's what they're called. They have military units that have the responsibility to respond to these issues on prevention of violations on the environment. And the second part of this is also we need to have an analysis, research about the military bases in our countries where they deal with the risks of climate change. And here, for example, in the United States, the government has said that, or has issued reports on the risks of drought, of potable water, and others at the military bases. And according to these, we have nearly $4 billion of investments and bases that are at risk with climate change, which is a very large amount. And we have to see how we can prevent these types of issues from occurring. We have another question. How do you address the problem of methane gas, which is more contaminating than CO2? The three forms of greenhouse gases is methanol and this water. Methanol is extremely powerful. It can last for many years in the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. And so there are many emissions in our industry, and many of this methanol is escaping because there are no efforts to prevent these gases from escaping. And for this reason, the governments need to make investments to prevent the escape of these gases in the different industries.
Señor Capitán de Fragata, Patrick Patterson.
Captain of Frigate Patrick Patterson, on behalf of the Inter-American Defense Board, we wish to thank you for your time to share this valuable information. And please be sure that it will be very useful in the decision-making of the countries of the Inter-American Defense Board countries in the fight against the increase of the temperature. Now, I have the honor of introducing our seventh panel member, Ms. Colonel of the Canadian Army, Chris Henderson of the military representing the Inter-American Defense Board, who will address the topic more than 130 days of forest fires, support of the Canadian Armed Forces to the forest fire season for 2023. Colonel Chris Henderson, good afternoon. You have the floor.
I am the Canadian Army Attaché to the United States, and it's a distinct privilege to be here this morning with you, representing my boss, Major General Mike St. Louis, to discuss some of the Canadian Forces' most recent experiences with natural disaster response in Canada. I must say, knowing that I'm likely the only person in the room and on the among the online participants that does not speak Spanish, I'm feeling very much like I did when I landed in Montreal 30 years ago as a young officer cadet to learn French. So I beg your patience as I do my best to convey these key lessons learned and observations that we are seeing in Canada to share with you. And I do apologize for having to do so in English. But I am very pleased to be here with you to convey those lessons. More specifically, we're going to leverage the experiences we saw fighting forest fires throughout the summer of 2023. I will make some passing reference to some broader context over these last several decades, or three decades, but I'll focus into the most recent experiences, which we just wrapped up over the last month. So to frame the discussion, I'll briefly mention the context within which the Canadian Forces can supports other echelons of government. in natural disaster scenarios. We'll talk about that significant fire season that we experienced this year in Canada. We'll briefly talk about some trends we've seen over the last 10 years or so, and talk about what it means for the Canadian Forces going forward. So for the context of Canadian Armed Forces responses to natural disasters, the first thing that you have to remember in our context is we are not the force of first resort. Our provincial and territorial levels of government in Canada have that responsibility, much like in the United States context, that would be at the state and municipal levels. If an emergency requires that more resources than the affected region has available, those jurisdictions may ask the federal government for additional resources, which may include the Canadian Armed Forces. Public Safety Canada, which is a very similar agency to the Department of Homeland Security here in the United States, is the agency to which provinces and territories in our context make those requests. When the Canadian Forces responds to such crises, you will hear us use the term Operation Lentus. That is the umbrella framework that we use when we are supporting other echelons of government in the domestic context for natural disaster response. When that happens, these provincial and territorial governments remain in charge of the response situation, the Canadian Forces providing support. Our support will complement and enhance their local resources and with unique capabilities, whether that is general purpose soldiers, sailors, and aviators, general labor, aircraft and supporting crews, medical assistance, etc. Other things we are often called forward to provide. And our main objective remains to help those provincial and territorial and local authorities stabilize the situation and to reassure residents in those affected areas. The size, structure, and capabilities of a Canadian Forces response is tailored each time to the specific circumstances of that particular emergency response. However, what we have seen over these last 20 years in particular, some of these come, and probably not unlike what you'll see in your own countries, some of that type of support can include filling, distributing, and placing sandbags, mopping up fires, evacuating Canadian citizens, transporting people, delivering aid, helping local law enforcement and provincial authorities communicate information to our citizens, checking on residents, and assessing infrastructure. So with that said, the rapid fire context within which we support other government agencies with disaster response, I'd like now to quickly transition to take a brief look at what we saw with this exceptionally intense fire season in Canada in the summer of 2023. Next slide, please. Back one, please. So this year was significantly larger than we have seen and longer season than the norm of the last 2 years or so. To give you a sense of the scale, so in excess of 185,000 square kilometers burned already this year, and that is more than the combined land mass area of Nicaragua and Costa Rica, just to give you a sense of the magnitude of the burns this year. Next slide, please. From my perspective, also what was a little unique this year was the fires touched us all across the country. I'll show you a graphic in a few moments that shows traditional areas that are most susceptible to drier conditions and therefore wildfires. But this year you can see it span east to west across our country and even up north, one of our northernmost territories, which was actually a quite significant burn. So I just wanted to draw that out as to some of the reasons why we found this particularly challenging season for every echelon of government across the country. Additionally, that fire season was longer than normal. So we were first called upon to assist the province of Alberta when you see puck number 1 in the west end of Canada. And very quickly thereafter, puck number 2 in the province of Nova Scotia along our Atlantic coast. So the fire season this year ran from the first week of May, our response to support other agencies, ran from the first week of May straight through to late September, which was abnormal for us for what we've been experiencing traditionally the last 20 years. As we've all laid out in some of the speakers already this morning, things are changing rapidly, and those traditions, those patterns are changing. We certainly saw that this year. Next slide, please. By the 1st of June this year, by that early stage of the summer, this is what the fire danger heat map looked like across Canada. This graphic doesn't represent fires, active fires, just the level of risk of fire throughout the country. And that, like I said, that's 1st of June, which is very early in our traditional season. And you can see through the areas of the country shaded yellow, orange, and red, how much of our country is particularly susceptible to fires. That combined, also on the 1st of June, this plots the active fires. And I call your attention, I know it's hard to pick out, but the larger red dots and the larger yellow dots, those larger red dots were out of control fires in excess of 1,000 hectares each of them. And I did some infantry math there prior to coming. That's about 40 active out of control fires that we had as early as the 1st of June. The larger yellow pucks that you see peppered across the map were fires that were being held, not quite under control and contained, but being held, again, in excess of 1,000 hectares. So very early in the summer period, we've already consumed and I just give you one other data point before I transition. In an average year, as I say, what's average anymore, but the average cost for fire response across echelons of government ranges anywhere from $800 million to $1.5 billion a year. So I don't have the data for what summer 2020 or 2023 is in that regard, but I'm sure it's well in excess of that 1.5 billion across all echelons of government. I just thought I'd offer that one data. Next slide, please. This is what this graphic represents is the volume of smoke and the concentration of carbon monoxide in that smoke from the period of the 1st of May through the 13th of June of this year. And those of us living here in Washington, I do apologize, but we all felt that it's far south as Washington this year, creating even health risks here, but certainly up in Canada, where the smoke originated, severe health hazards for our citizens. And as we even notice here at Reagan Airport, lots of impacts to air traffic, commercial air traffic throughout the country. Next slide, please. Talk a bit more specifics on response. So as of the first call we got, like I said, was from the province of Alberta in May. Next, please, or next slide. By the end of September of this year, the Canadian Forces had initiated 8 off-Atlantis deployments across the country in support of various requests for assistance. Again, spanning Nova Scotia, Quebec, Ontario, Alberta, British Columbia, and the Northwest Territories. For this year, that represented for the Canadian Forces, that represented a cumulative commitment of more than 2,500 Canadian Forces members, and spanning a total period of 177 days. And again, for context, that's not our largest commitment. It's up there, but our largest commitments in recent memory are the ice storms that went through the seaports from Quebec City straight down to Southern Ontario in 1998, followed a close second by the flooding in southern Manitoba, to the middle of the prairies of Canada in 1997, which is a huge flood risk, has been for over 100 years. And then the Okanagan wildfires in southern British Columbia in 2003. All of those deployments saw well in excess of 2,500 soldiers across our joint force to support those efforts. The 2,100 in a military that is suffering retention challenges, like all of our military seem to be these days, that was a significant commitment for us, given our size of our joint force. I do want to provide now just some historical context, as I was just starting to touch on that. The top right graph shows the last 10 years, shows the number of days the Army was deployed on domestic operations, whether they be fires, floods, etc. per year. 2021 saw a dramatic uptick from previous years to multiple instances of flooding. 2021 was a particularly bad year for flooding for us across Canada. Of note, these numbers do not reflect the 118 requests from various jurisdictions that we had for support from Canadian Forces just to support the pandemic response. Whether that was assisting with medical aid in long-term care facilities or when vaccines were getting approved, helping distribute the vaccines, not just in southern Canada, but across the spans of our north, which is quite sparse, and our military help to get those vaccines to our citizens. So this is just natural disaster response, just in the last 10 years. Bottom graph, again, not talking about our joint force. Back one, please. The bottom graph on the right is just the impact of the Canadian Army, and now I'm just drilling into the Army piece. Then you can see it's very familiar here, but still sizable commitments. Again, given the scale, the size of our military, we have, like we did in 2017, upwards of 4,500 soldiers deployed to fight fires and floods. That was here. Some of the observations of some of the stats, sorry, if I could just on the left, that's what the Army slice of the forest fire response just made through September. The Army, 2,390 million across various divisions of across the Canadian Army. Also of note, since 2017, the number of domestic deployments that we're seeing on a yearly basis has significantly increased. So even just when I contrast numbers from 2013 to 16, where we only saw maybe one or two opulentous natural disaster response operations, since 2017, this has increased to anywhere from 5 to 8 opulentous operations on an annual basis. And in terms of number of people between 2013 and 2023 for the Army, personnel were deployed to assist in what we classify as major events. Now, we say a major event is something that's taking 1,000 soldiers or more almost every other year. Where I am taking this is the impacts on our readiness. Next slide, please. Before I start talking about impacts to our readiness, this is what we fear might be the new. What this heat map, represents. You see the rest of the color. This is just average our fires were in Canada in 2020 and 2021. And given the expanse of our country, this is concerning. Is this the new number for reasons that Dr. Patterson and others have laid out? This is concerning from military readiness perspective. Next slide, please. And I appreciate Dr. Patterson just mentioning some of these scary numbers, and I would just say really quickly, not to repeat things he's already said, in the Canadian context, we're seeing that our temperatures upwards of 1.7 degrees. I think they'll talk about some 2 degrees slightly higher, which is concerning. When it's concerning enough, this is what we're experiencing here. And I will profess to be a scientist of what we do. It's part of the reason why we're seeing some flooding. Obviously, we're getting some spots are getting drier faster than longer. Next, please. So what does this mean for the Canadian Forces and the Canadian Army? I mentioned already, there are impacts to our readiness. Soldiers committed to these operations are not able to maintain high readiness skills and proficiency or continue collective training that is building readiness, or being able to provide instructor augmentation at our various training schools that provide advanced level skills training as part of the annual readiness cycle. If the frequency and duration of these smaller events continues or increases, it will put a strain on the future force generation of Canadian Army personnel for both other domestic, and certainly international operations. These operations also, when we do Operation Atlantis here in Canada, it also increases the time away from home garrison and families, in addition to the normal force generation training requirements that we demand of our soldiers. This is adding increased stress on these soldiers and their families, which in some cases is aggravating our retention problems currently in the Canadian Army. For example, some soldiers this summer spent well in excess of 30 to 40 days supporting a particular aspect of Operation Lentis somewhere in the country, very little rest, and then having to go to a training base on the other side of the country either to receive training or to help deliver training as part of our fourth generation cycle in the Army. Next slide, please. So where do we go from here? Because of our experiences over the last 20 years, particularly, there's certainly lots of debate and discussion going on inside the Canadian Forces whether or not we can continue to sustain this. That is to say, being called upon to do so much domestic, or assist with so much domestic disaster response. But this is an open discussion. But I think, given the expeditionary demands on our force, much like some of yours, and the retention problems to which I've referred a couple times already, this is getting more and more airtime among senior leaders, not just in the military, but in our Department of Defense, and I think despite Canadians feeling reassured with the Canadian Forces to assist the best use of expensive forces at readiness for completely different purposes, or should we have a different organization for natural disaster response? If so, at which echelons of government should it be present? Why is there not sufficient resiliency currently within provincial and territorial jurisdictions if we're capable of responding to natural disasters? These are the types of things that are coming up in conversations as we try to get better and do better by our fellow Canadians as we see more of these natural disasters. Should there be a formal role for the Canadian Forces in such circumstances? While the Canadian Armed Forces is always prepared to support civil authorities and the people of Canada, provincial and territorial authorities are the first to respond when a major natural disaster occurs in Canada. If they become overwhelmed, they may ask the Canadian Armed Forces for help. However, the capabilities and trained personnel of the Canadian Armed Forces are finite and should only be involved when no other organization has the capacity to respond. These are the types of questions that are being asked at various levels inside and outside the Canadian Forces as natural disasters become increasingly more frequent and severe. We haven't come to a decision or conclusions in those debates and discussions. Next slide, please. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been my pleasure to join you today and share some Canadian context regarding the use of Canadian Forces in natural disasters, not just this year, but again, hopefully walk away with a bit of broader context of what we're seeing, patterns over the last 10 to 20 years. I hope this has been useful and added value to the dialogue regarding our shared critical challenge of climate change. Thank you for your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Señor Coronel Henderson, qué importante compartir esa información
It
sobre
is important, Colonel Henderson, it was very important to share this work of the forces of Canada against the forest fires and so many challenges that you've had, because we have felt them the same as well. And in this sense, there is a question from the audience. What are the main lessons learned from the activities of firefighting carried out together between civilians and military personnel?
But I would offer two things in response. Some of the things we've learned, some hard lessons learned over these last 20 years, is when government agencies, civilian agencies, or civilian colleagues need something they don't know what to ask for. It's probably the same in your countries. We don't speak the same language. We don't speak the same technical language. So one of the things that we learned was very quickly was the need, because they don't know what to ask for, they might ask for the wrong things. They ask for too much. I mentioned a few times we've been passing reference to the size of our force. We can't afford trying to maintain readiness for other things outside the country. So it may seem simple, but again, we learned the hard way, but the use of liaison officers. So we now have, since these last 20 years, in every province and territory, we have liaison officers to emergency management organizations at And we've gotten much, much better. Again, we're getting some practice at it every year, it seems. These liaison officers are pre-positioned with their civilian colleagues to advise what they need to ask for. And they know the process to do it, but it's really what they need to ask for. Those liaison officers are also helping us as a joint force, making sure that we're not being asked for resources that they really don't need. And I suspect it would be the same perspective in your respective countries. You don't want to replicate or duplicate things that those civilian agencies are able to do. That's a guiding principle for us. So it's a simple thing like we do on tactical operations of using liaison officers to do the same thing in these types of operations. Secondly, the need to anticipate. Again, for military professionals, that's pretty self-evident. That's pretty obvious. We have gotten better, while it's not our primary responsibility, to do things like in the Canadian context. Along with civilian colleagues, we are watching in the wintertime how much snow, watching the snowpack, how much snow is actually falling. We can start forecasting based on the snowpack and the snowfall in certain areas of the country where we think we're going to see drought in the summer, where we think we're going to see flooding. So again, we'll look at that ourselves, but so our civilian colleagues bring that together. Together we can better anticipate. And for us, again, military perspective, it gives us the opportunity. We don't always get it right, but when we do, we can better mitigate, we better anticipate and ask from a territorial government, or provincial government, and things we might do in advance to mitigate the impacts to our high readiness forces, training institution, whatever the case may be. So I offer those two things in response that we have learned from last time.
Muchas gracias, mi coronel. Señor coronel del
Thank you very much, Colonel Chris Henderson of the military team of the delegation of Canada to the OAS. On behalf of the IADB, we want to thank you for the efforts that you have carried out as the Armed Forces of Canada to respond to the forest fires and the challenges that you face together with other organizations. Next, I have the honor of announcing the Ambassador Gustavo Lino Ariancen Olaya, the permanent representative of the Republic of Peru to the OAS and the chairman of the Commission of Hemispheric Security of the OAS. Distinguished colleagues and participants to the Conference on the Protection of the Environment, good morning to you all. First of all, allow me to express my most sincere gratitude and congratulations to the Inter-American Defense Board and the Ministry of Defense of Peru for this initiative, and very especially to the Minister of Defense of Peru, Brigadier General Jorge Bicha Cresta, the President of the Council of Delegates of the Inter-American Defense Board, Brigadier General Marco Antonio Reyes, and the General Director of the Secretary of the IADB, Flavio Luis Oliveira Pinto. Thank you all for your leadership and for this initiative that could not but complete a space that was so necessary on an issue just like the protection of the environment and the interrelation and the close participation between our armed forces in this topic. I also want to thank all and each one of those that attended both virtually and face-to-face to this event. And of course, our distinguished speakers who have brought the knowledge of their professional practice to this event, and to each one of the collaborators and organizers of this event as well. Thank you. The discussion that we have seen today has been very enriching, and no doubt it is a testimony of the importance that we give to our natural environment and to the whole hemisphere. During this conference, we have had the privilege of listening to experts from several countries and different organizations who have shared with us their perspectives and experiences on how the armed forces and the military organizations can perform and are performing right now a crucial role in this protection to the environment. We have learned, for instance, about the airspace capabilities that contribute to the care of the environment in Peru. Perusal is a fundamental artifact that contributes in a decisive way to the protection of the environment in the Peruvian territory. As well, we have talked about the of the management of the environment in Brazil, and who gave very concrete examples on how we are reducing the negative impact to the environment through the activities that they carry out. We have also learned experiences of Serena from Mexico to help to the protection of the environment through the necessary planting of crops and the treatment of wastewaters and the restoration of the soils and reforestation. We have also reviewed the challenges and strategies and good practices of the OAS to reduce the environmental impact caused by the illegal manufacturing of drugs in the Americas, keeping in mind how the chemical wastes are used for the production of these substances that become polluting agencies of our rivers and the public waters. And we can see that even the waters that are just 1 kilometer away are polluted. We have heard the role of the military forces in the protection of the Colombian Amazonia and the role that the armed forces have carried out in face of climate change. And finally, we have also observed the great challenges derived from the 130 days, more than 130 days of forest fires in Canada, and that we have been explained about the seriousness, and we have been able to see how the armed forces participated in a decisive way to stop them. All these debates have given us a complete vision of national cooperation and the protection of our environment. And in a moment like this of constant change, it is fundamental to work together to approach all these environmental problems and solve the environmental problem for future generations. I want to thank all the participants for their commitment and dedication in this very important topic, and the executions of today have laid the basis for future collaboration and concrete actions in the protection of the environment. With this encounter, we reinforce the multidimensional and streamlining issue of the environment. That's why that the hemispheric security and other organizations will continue working in each one of our countries to protect the environment in our hemisphere. As the Minister of Defense said, it is time to take action for the protection of the environment. We have to join our public policies on the environment at the national level, but above all, at a hemispheric level. This is the job of everybody, and with this, we will be able to give a good response. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for your remarks, Ambassador. To continue, I am pleased to introduce Brigadier General Marco Antonio Alvarez Reyes, Chairman of the Council of Delegates of the Inter-American Defense Board. Thank you very much for all of you for your participation. I allowed myself to take some notes during this first conference, and maybe I coincide in this awareness that is being strengthened in all of us. The protection of our environment, to the preservation of our environment, to the care of our environment, to find joint solutions to protect our environment, and the world risks for forced us to interact, to reduce the impacts throughout the world. The care of the environment is an international commitment that impacts the democracy and our development and human rights and security of our nations. This first conference will strengthen our capability to incentivize an equilibrium and also to promote a change of attitude and to assume with responsibility the identification to be able to respond to this challenge. On behalf of all of the members of the Inter-American Defense Board, I want to thank the Minister of Defense of the Republic of Peru, the Armed Forces of Peru, the Ambassador Gustavo Lino, and we will continue working on this challenge and many others together with the OAS and also with the Secretariat of the OAS in compliance with the mandates of the Charter. Ladies and gentlemen, speakers that made possible this first conference, the delegates, and especially those that are listening to us both virtually and face by face, the Senator Perry, the Army of Colombia, the Defense Ministry of Canada, protect, preserve the future of the next generations, so that our habitat is not affected, that the pollution due to neglect doesn't continue. And I hope that all these lessons learned will lead us to generate real solutions and efficient ones and timely ones with a multiplying effect. To take care of the environment is to take care of the health of our world. Each one of our actions on a daily basis, day and night, are going to respond to this objective to recover every day the health of our world, of our environment. It seems that we are assuming this challenge, but we still have a lot to go. There were many terms that I found, like global heating, warming, and environmental pollution, the contamination of air, water, and land, deforestation, migration, and displacement, the desertification of forest fires, and it's not even summer, and we're impacted by the smoke in the first days of June. Principles and values that have to generate awareness among all of us that all these experiences and lessons learned must create a precise and efficient and timely actions to have a better world, a better environment for the future generations, and not wait until 2100 or the 3.5 degrees in the increase of temperature. So this is the final words before closing this Congress, and thank you for being with us face to face and also virtually. And now it is 12:30, and I close this event formally. I close this first conference first, thanking you for all your contributions and the lessons learned today. We have to be aware, and we have to continue demanding from our own houses to preserve the health of the world in which we live. Thank you very much, and thank you for everyone that was listening to us through the through our link. Thank you, General. With the closing remarks of Brigadier General Marco Antonio Alvarez Reyes, the chairman of the Council of Delegates of the Inter-American Defense Board, we end the transmission of the first conference of protection of the environment, and we hope that it has been of your complete pleasure. We invite you cordially to inscribe yourselves in the next event that will take place.
De ciberdefensa, a desarrollarse el día 8 de noviembre. Asimismo, pueden conocer las actividades que desarrolla la Junta Interamericana de Defensa a través de nuestra página web www.hit.org. Los certificados de participación serán enviados a la brevedad a los correos electrónicos de inscripción, adjuntándole
And we are going to attach satisfaction
a través de nuestro proceso de
for you to fill in so that we can continue with our continuous improvement processes of the facilities of the historical house of the soldiers. Please receive our greetings for your attention. To American Defense Board, promoting and strengthening the trust and security of the hemisphere.
Recording stopped.